considered to be the holiest day of the year. It's Easter, the day of resurrection, the day of new birth, the day when God transformed the old covenant through Jesus Christ into a new covenant. A covenant with a living God. A covenant of salvation and restoration. But what do we believe? You sit here this morning, or those who came yesterday, and we come on this holy day, and then we have to ask ourselves, well, what do we really believe? Do we believe that Christ is risen? Do we really believe that it was a physical resurrection today? In today's world, it might be more questionable. People ask all these questions. Was it physical? Was it spiritual? Was it just symbolic? Is it just a false lie, told through history? And what do we really believe? It's a myth to make us feel good, right? I've heard people say that. I think something we need to know and claim when we show up at church on Easter morning is, what is it that we really do believe about it? What does it look like? I saw a video on Facebook this last week, I think. Some of you may have seen it. There's this guy who's sitting down, it's about Easter time, getting his hair cut at a barber and reading scripture as he's getting his hair cut. And, kind of in a way sharing his faith, talking a little bit. And the barber's talking and kind of looking over his shoulder and seeing what's happening and what he's reading. And as he's paying and getting ready to leave, the barber says, I just need to say, I don't really believe in God. I don't really believe in that God stuff. And the guy's like, well, I don't understand. Why don't you believe? I mean, didn't you grow up in church? Or what is it that made it so that you're not comfortable believing in God? The guy says, well, I look at the world around me and I look at the chaos. I look at all the things that are falling apart, that are messed up, and the people that are hurting and broken, and God can't really exist if He's allowing all that to happen. God can't really be a part of this world if He's allowing all of that to take place. And the guy wasn't quite sure what to say. He says, well, we're people, we're humans, we have free will. We can choose whether or not we believe in that, but we still hurt each other, and there's still pain in the world, and I can't answer all that for you, but I believe. I believe in God. He didn't really have the best of answers, and maybe stumbled through it a little bit and left. Maybe we stumble through our questions. Maybe we stumble through our answers. Maybe we're not sure what we believe in the first place, and so we stumble even more. What does it look like? This passage to me is powerful. This passage is the women and then Peter running to the tomb and to find this empty tomb. And I like to look and realize, we're not the only ones who might struggle with our answers or struggle with our understanding of faith. Look at what happened when you read this passage. The first thing that happens, these women show up at the tomb, and the tomb it's empty. I mean, the stone is rolled away, the guards are gone, it's different than what they expect. And they're perplexed. Okay, occasionally we get perplexed, don't we? I know there have been times I've even gone to the barber and get my hair cut, and I leave and I look at my hair and go, I'm a little perplexed. Anybody else know what I'm talking about? You're perplexed because what you thought was going to happen when you got to the barber wasn't really what happened when you got to the barber. We get perplexed pretty easily. And that's what the women found out when they got there. This is not what we expected. The tomb's empty. The body gone, the guards gone, the stone rolled away. What's going on? I think the honest truth is we encounter life like that on occasion. Not just our spiritual life, but our day-to-day basis. This isn't what I expected, Lord. Now what do I do with it? We get perplexed. And then the next thing that happens is all of a sudden these two angels, bright, dazzling, beautiful angels show up and they appear and they're shining in glory, and it's actually up there it says they are frightened. The word that I have is terrified. They fall down. They don't just fall down to worship. They don't just humbly bow down politely and start praying or worshiping. No, they're frightened. They're scared to death and terrified by this situation. Okay? Have any of you gotten your hair cut and been like that? Maybe not quite, but once in a while, you get your hair colored, right? And it's the wrong color, right, Rachel? She's totally ignoring me there. Then you just go back and get a different one, right? So you know what I'm talking about. It's like, that's terrifying. Or maybe you look at somebody else's hairdo and you think that. There are times that we don't experience what we think we're going to experience in the presence of God. And we get terrified. Or we get terrified because God didn't show up the way we thought God was going to show up. Didn't answer the prayer that we thought he was going to answer the way we thought he should answer. And on and on and on. And all of a sudden our perplexity goes to, we're terrified. Sometimes we're even terrified because we hear God calling us to do something that we're not even sure we want to do, or go somewhere that we don't even want to go, and we have to decide, am I going to be faithful enough to follow you even though I'm afraid? What does that look like? What does faith in the light of an empty tomb look like when we're perplexed and when we're frightened? Now these women who experienced this firsthand, they run back and they go back and they tell the disciples, okay, it'd be like one of these gatherings right here. People are gathered and they're fellowshipping together, maybe breaking bread, they're praying, maybe singing, and they're gathered together. The faithful followers of Jesus, they're still all a little confused because they just watched him be crucified. Now what do? And these women showed up and they start telling the story. We got there, we were going to prepare the body, and it's gone, and he's risen. He told us to go meet him. They told us to go meet him in Galilee, and they're excited about this story. But you know what? Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just the fact that it was women that was telling the story that they didn't believe him. You're supposed to laugh at that part. But the truth is, in that day and era, no, the word of a woman might not have had the same value. What do we really believe? Are we going to take that person's word for it? No. Am I going to trust their word? Am I going to hear what they have to tell me or what they have seen or witnessed about God? Sometimes we do have to accept the word of another person. We have to believe that they've given them a word of wisdom or something to guide them that might guide us in the process. How do we receive that? You know how the disciples received it? It says that they considered it to be an idle tale, a false story, something that wasn't really true. Sometimes we all might struggle with doubt. This Christ story, it's too good to be true. This good news, it might be too good to be true. God can love me. I mean, I know what I've done. Can God really love me in the midst of that? That story's too good to be true. It's got to be a false tale. Peter, in fact, he's the only one. Peter, the man who just 3 days before denied knowing Jesus 3 times. Peter, who stumbled over his faith, ran from his accusers, hid, who went back to fishing, didn't know what to do. Peter was the one who, when he heard the news, instead of just saying it's false, he jumped up out of his place and he ran to the tomb. He went in and saw the clothes that were there and the body gone. It doesn't say he was perplexed. It doesn't say he was terrified. It doesn't say he believed it was an idle tale. It said he left in amazement. He was amazed because he was confident and he knew and he believed in his heart what had happened. And I think in our lives we have to choose for ourselves to what is it that we believe? What emotion will we pick? What lifestyle of faith will we choose? Will we choose to live a faith that is perplexed and always confused or terrified and unsure or believing things are an idle tale, not trusting what someone else is telling us, but always holding firm to, no, that can't be possible? Or will we maybe even be willing, like Peter, to get up out of our seat, out of our comfort zone, to run to an empty tomb, to look at something that is beyond amazement and approach it with a new perspective. What does that look like? How do we live that kind of faith? You know that barber that had just told his customer that he didn't really believe in God. Well, the customer exited the barber shop and he kind of goes around the corner and he's still struggling. You know how you encounter those conversations, you're not quite sure what the answers are, and you encounter and just struggle through it. And he comes around this corner and he sees this guy. This guy that obviously hadn't been to a barber in a long time. His hair was, way down, hadn't obviously had a shower, or was unclean, and his hair was just kind of a confused mess, tangled, like shooting out every which direction. How many of you wake up like that in the morning? So you know what I'm talking about. Well, this is what he looked like, and he grabs this guy by the elbow and says, will you come with me for just a second? And he walks this total stranger back into the barber, and he stands the guy right there in front of the barber and says, you know what? I've come to a conclusion that I do not believe that barbers exist. The guy's like, what? Well, he says, look at this man right here. If barbers really existed, would they allow someone like this to walk around with their hair all in shambles and sticking out all over the place and unkempt? Seriously, I do not believe in barbers. He says, well, that's not fair. He just hasn't come to see me. He hasn't come to sit in my chair so that I can actually cut his hair. And the guy said, that's what's truth about free will. Just because you haven't been to sit in the seat of the Father, just because you haven't gone to the empty tomb, just because you haven't opened the Word and believed for yourself, doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. It just means you haven't taken your heart to that place. One thing that's true, some of you who know me, I go through phases, and the beard's here or not here, and hair is longer or not here. You never know what you're going to get. But one thing that I know is true, when I go get my hair cut, well, first of all, Jody doesn't like the beard gone. She thinks I look too young without the beard. I don't know why. But one thing that's true, anytime I get my hair cut, my beard trimmed, and invariably I have people tell me, you look like a new person. I think that's true too. When we come into the presence of God, we sit at the throne of God, and we allow God to actually have some effect in our life. All of a sudden, we leave that chair looking like a new person. Our ragged, unkempt hair is tamed and trimmed and put back in place. You see, it's not about whether you believe God exists or not, because the truth is, He does. It's not even something that you have to worry about whether or not you believe in a physical resurrection or not. The truth is, it is. And the truth is, all we have to do is actually allow ourselves to sit in the throne of God and allow God to actually come and place His arms around us, care for us, to reshape and form us in the way that He has designed us to be. What does faith look like when we actually allow God to touch us? The question maybe we should be asking ourselves is, are we perplexed to come to worship or to open the Bible? Are we confused by what we read? Maybe we haven't sat there long enough, because I'll promise you, if you open the Word or if you come to church enough, you're not just going to be perplexed, you're probably going to be terrified. You're going to be frightened at what God's telling you, or how God's convicting you, or how God's pushing you to go a step further. Not only that, you're going to go through that phase of perplexity and then being frightful and fearful and scared, and then you're going to be all of a sudden think, is this really true? And then hopefully, maybe you will reach that point of sitting at the throne of God and saying, I am amazed. I am in wonder at how much God loves me and how much God has sacrificed for me. Our message today is a message of Easter. It's a message of transformation. It's a message of hope. But we need to ask ourselves the question of, what does it mean if I believe in an empty tomb? How does it change me? And will I allow myself to sit there and let God be the one who shapes me? I pray and I challenge you, I pray that you will let God be the one who has his hands in your life. Instead of running in fear, embrace him in amazement. Would you pray with me?